1-star reviews.
The Godfather.
Did you hate The Godfather? Add your 1-star review in the comments.
Massively overrated. I continually fail to understand why The Godfather is hailed as the greatest movie of all time. I've seen it twice a second time just to make sure, and I have to tell you that I sat there in a stupor. Bored out of my mind. And I'm not a teenager raised on MTV. I'm in my 30s and am absolutely devoted to movies. I've seen as many classics, American and foreign, that I can get my hands on. But, for me, The Godfather ranks alongside Singin' in the Rain as the most overrated films of all time. Singin' in the Rain, at least, I get it's just my intense dislike for Donald O'Connor that makes me dislike this film. But The Godfather? It's just a bland epic about a bunch of moronic gangsters. With Marlon Brando giving a campy performance. And riddled with repulsive violence. Give me a break. The fact that this movie is so beloved has had the direct result that nowadays we got absurdly worse and worse films every year. Created by clueless filmmakers.
One of those films everyone loves but no one wants to watch. I follow recommendations on this site highly. I rented this movie and wanted my money back. Ever been to one of those parties with distant relatives where you don't know anyone there and just sit in the corner waiting for it to end? If so, you've seen 90% of this movie. Throw in a few good scenes that happen so far apart. You forget the last one by the time you see the next one. Might be worth watching once just to say you have. But you'll probably never watch it again. Definitely not best movie ever material.
What is so great about it? This movie is ridiculously overrated. It is merely a overly dramatized celluloid interpretation of life involved with the Italian mafia. Yes, organized crime is a problem. But this movie is not all that amazing. There are entirely too many references to it in other movies. Too many spoofs and too many quotes. It's a bad movie. Let it go. There is no real plot line and the bad accents were enough to give me a headache. This movie is mind-numbingly boring. It feels as though I lose brain cells every time I am forced to watch this painfully shallow film. Most films following along a similar premise are horribly dull. Why does everyone rave about movies like this and Scarface? They are awful, overly exaggerated and generally badly constructed cinematic failures. A decent script and plot line were substituted for gratuitous blood, gore and explosions. A good movie starts with a good story and a good script. This lacks both. Every aspect of this movie was horribly boring. It does not deserve to be named the best movie of all time.
Vastly overrated movie. Finally took the time to give myself a real treat and watch this film again after about 20 years, as I remembered it as a supremely good film. I have watched many movies from all over the world during the years and have developed a keen eye for good filmmaking. So wanted to review one of the greats, after having watched it again. I have no choice but to face the fact that this film is indeed very poor filmmaking, and I have to admit that I feel embarrassed that I once actually considered this a good film. The biggest gripe I have with this film is the unbelievably poor and unconvincing acting. Devoid of any emotional depth whatsoever. Everybody is sterile and no one is worth caring even the least bit about. Secondly, almost every opportunity for character dynamics and development is missed. The only character that is developed is Michael Corleone's, and even that character is changing from one extreme to the other in an instant, with no transition whatsoever. The result is characters as mere moronic caricatures to the point of absurdity. A staggering waste of talent, to top it off. The storyline is thin and highly predictable. Simply an unforgivable waste of potential. The organized crime genre of films have always fascinated me and continue to do so. With so many truly great films in this genre, don't waste your time on this one. The Godfather is one of the very worst.
A bore fest from beginning to end. I saw this movie when it first came out in the movie theaters. It was the first movie I seriously considered walking out of. Up to that point in my life I had never fidgeted so much in a movie. I blame the director. His pacing was so ponderous that the story seemed to go on and I could hardly wait for it to be over. The whole Godfather series is vastly overrated.
Most overrated film of all time. This movie continues to be praised. But when I rented it I only made it through 45 minutes before I stopped the video. There aren't many movies that are so bad I don't watch the whole thing. But The Godfather is that bad. I don't care how much other people may like it. I still say it sucks. 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 Sucks.
The most overrated movie of all time. Let me just start by saying that I am 50% Italian. I have nothing against mafia movies. In fact, I have nothing against any type of movie. But, to say that this is the best movie of all time is simply insane. I saw absolutely nothing special. I kind of enjoyed the performances of Al Pacino, Marlon Brando, and James Caan. But besides that, there is not one really exceptional feature in sight. And the fact that it is 1 hour too long only brought down my enjoyment. It's not the worst film of all time. But not the best either.
Number 1 movie. It's madness, I tell you, madness. I'm voting and commenting about this film just to bring it down from its pedestal and invite everyone to do the same. I have nothing against Italians, the mafia or any of the principals. But best film ever? Never. It was an entertaining film, which displayed some rather ridiculous acting in a gross piece of defamation perpetrated on the Italians. I have nothing against violence and gore, even sex, on screen when appropriate. But this is a ludicrous consensus your readership has reached and it must be corrected.
The God-Awful Father. This movie has to be the most overrated movie of all time. I don't understand why everyone raves about this movie. It's boring. The acting is shallow and weak. The whole premise is annoying. And I had to fight off sleep 3 times to finish this movie. This movie has 2 layers. Boring, barely audible speech, and explosions. I didn't think it to be possible. But even the explosions were boring. Where does the fascination for this movie come from? Marlon Brando may have been a good early actor. But this'll make him an offer he can't refuse. Old man voice is so irritating I almost threw the DVD out the window. However, the movie ended up numbing all my extremities so that it was impossible to move as I had no choice but to sit on in horror. I'm sorry I ever wasted my time on this piece of garbage. With a weak premise, ludicrous character designs, and a plot that could cure insomnia, Godfather sleeps with the fishes. With a 1 out of 10.
Not what I expected. After hearing about this legendary film I decided it was about time I watched it. After about an hour I really wished I hadn't wasted the money renting it. After the movie finished I was bored. The film was nothing like I had expected and I don't know how it possibly made it as big as it has. It was quite well cast. I love Diane Keaton but she's better in Woody Allen's comedies than in this derivative movie. You want a good gangster movie, watch Goodfellas. It actually has a good story, entertaining characters and violence, and paints a much more realistic picture of the mob world of the era. I'm not even going to bother watching parts 2 or 3 of The Godfather cause Marlon Brando ain't even in them, so there ain't much point. I think I'll go watch Marlon Brando's greatest performance, Guys and Dolls.
Overrated to the extent that perhaps makes me underrate it. This film is long and dull. As a result of the first, it is dull for very long periods. Which is why this film warrants no more than a miserly 1/10. The acting is competent but no more, and I must confess I lost my focus towards the end due to the quite shocking lack of entertainment that can be attributed to a poor script, lackluster direction, and a plot which leaves a lot to be desired. People say Godfather is rare in that its sequel improves upon it. But that isn't hard. Al Pacino gained a big reputation from this one and I am left bemused as to why. And this unfortunate idea has meant Pacino, a mediocre actor at best, has been able to infiltrate our cinema screens on far too many occasions with a distinct lack of passion or charisma in any role he displays.
Grossly and undeservingly overrated. I watched the DVD recently because everyone seems to be hyped about this greatest movie on earth. Well, I wouldn't waste your valuable time any further writing a lot here after wasting my good 3 hours watching so-called Godfather. I nearly died of boredom. Simply,
This is one of the most boring, longest movies I have ever watched. And it is horrible. Is it a great story? No. Is it a great movie? Not at all. It is just a welded work of so many boring, long celluloid pieces together. There is no stature, depth, matter or even an exciting plot. After all, Brando is a good actor but not that great in this one for sure. And I am still at a loss to understand why people give this rut 9.2. It would of course be totally right just without the 9.
Best film ever? Number 1 movie of all time? I think that's what ruined it for me. I sat down expecting to watch the most spectacular cinematic experience of my life, but instead I ended up sitting rather bored for the good part of 3 hours. Everything about it just lacked in moving me. The vengeance was untouched. Parts of the story seemed too obvious and other parts just left untouched. Thoroughly, this was the most disappointing film I've ever seen. Not the worst. Just the most disappointing. I'm not trying to change anyone's thoughts on the film or make out the film as bad, just in case anyone gets the impression. Thanks.